Hey folks, welcome back. Hope you're doing well out there. So I'm super excited to share this video with you. This is a conversation I've been wanting to start with you here on the channel for quite a while. And I feel like, now that we've kind of completed some of the look at the kind of more mystical experience, spiritual side of using psychedelics, we're going to kind of put that down for a moment. We're going to pivot over and we're going to start talking about a whole epiphany that I had about a year ago around this work, around how to use psychedelics to heal and how psychedelic therapy is done, how trauma therapy is done, how to work with people best as a coach and as a hypnotherapist. In my case, this whole big understanding just boom, popped in my lap one day. And I want to start to frame this out with you. I want to start to build this conversation with you because what I have to share here is truly a life-changing understanding. And it's very deep. The implications stretch very wide into just about every part of our lives. And it's very much the how to do this, right? And so in this video, we're going to start to unpack what it is that I started to understand in this epiphany. And hopefully this will be of some use to you, no matter where you're at, whether you're just, following my channel because you resonate with my content and you're just on a healing journey that has nothing to do with psychedelics, or if you're someone who's actively using psychedelics to try to self-heal or pursuing psychedelic therapy or wanting to become a psychedelic therapist yourself or a coach yourself or anyone working with other people, this video is really going to apply. So I'd love for you to join me with this conversation about this epiphany I had and the implications of it. And it's probably not at all you think. And I think you'll get a lot out of it. So let's talk about it. Yeah. So like I said in the intro, about a year ago, I, had been kind of prepping and gearing up to go do an underground training on how to be a psychedelic guide for like psilocybin assistance or MDMA assistance, these kinds of things. And I was kind of at a point about a year ago where there was kind of a nexus of convergence of all these different approaches that I was studying, whether this was my studies of trauma therapy and really understanding and being better informed around trauma, my studies of hypnosis and conversational hypnosis, my studies of coaching and how to build a good coaching conversation with people, my studies of different aspects of psychology and spirituality. This is a path I've been on for decades now, honestly, but it's all been kind of converging slowly towards an integrated understanding of how this all fits together. And about a year ago, all of that pop together in place. And that's what I'm going to tell you about today. So we're not going to get so much in the how-to here. In fact, I'm going to be making a course that's really the how-to, but I'm going to, of course, be giving you pieces about the how-to along the way here on the channel. Today, we're going to be talking about what unfolded in my understanding. And, as perhaps less interesting as that sounds, so much of doing this work properly is about a clear understanding. It is about really getting what's going on here and how to approach this right in order to get the success. So I want to share this with you because it was a mind-blowing moment for me. And what I've been doing with it has also been equally mind-blowing. So as I've applied this understanding, in my coaching work with my clients, the results we've been getting have just been so incredible, right? Some of the breakthroughs I've seen have just been jaw-dropping. And so this really has, borne out a lot of validity so far in terms of its accuracy. So without further ado, let me start unpacking it here. I know I can kind of waffle on in these intros. So let me just kind of wrap this section. Let's start talking about, all the different things I learned. And we're going to start by talking about first principles thinking, because this is something I want you to understand in general. And also it's part of how I got to the insight I got to. So let's talk about first principles thinking just as a way to kind of frame out this conversation. Okay, so for any of you who are not familiar, there is a way of thinking. There's an approach to thinking called first principles thinking. And this is a tool that I use actually a lot in my own life. It's also a tool that I use a lot with my clients. It's actually something I teach my clients for the kind of cognitive side of integration with psychedelics. So, if we've had these big, wild, far out beliefs start to pop up, or ideas or insights or questions in a psychedelic experience, and also just as a life skill, we take in all these ideas from the internet or from people around us. We need to be able to apply first principles thinking to start to refine these things down to something much more clear. Often, this is also a great tool for kind of undoing toxic beliefs that we might be holding, ideas about ourselves or about life that are, limiting or wounding or causing us distress, right? And so I want to teach you about first principles thinking, because this is an absolutely essential tool. So some of you may already be familiar, but essentially first principles thinking is the idea of looking at, whatever idea we're engaging, whatever we're thinking about, what are the foundational assumptions we're making in order for this idea or topic to be true, right? So, let me see. If we are talking cognitive behavioral therapy, for example, right? I'm just random example here. We could just as easily talk about anything. But if we're talking like, let's say CBT, right? One of the foundational assumptions of CBT is that if we modulate the way people think, that will change the way they feel, right? And sometimes that's true, which is why CBT works sometimes, and sometimes that doesn't work for everyone, which is also why sometimes CBT really doesn't work, right? What would be another assumption about CBT? That there's a link between language and cognition and behavior, right? And I think there's some truth to that. But, how robust is that link would be another question, right? Another assumption, under cognitive behavioral therapy is that this kind of what's called a top-down approach, where we're controlling, thoughts, is the best way to do therapy, right? That this is an effective way to do therapy, right? And so these are all assumptions built into the very idea of CBT, of cognitive behavioral therapy. I'm sure there's a bunch of others there that I'm not thinking of right now, but these would all be valid things to question and go, is that true? Is working with cognition the best way to do therapy, right? Is working, is the link between language and cognition, which are not the same thing? We use language as a tool for cognition, but they're not one-to-one. Is the link between language, cognition, and behavior, is that all a robust link? Is that all strong enough to achieve every therapeutic goal we might have, for example, right? So this would just be one example of first principles thinking. We're always looking at what is the foundational thing that needs to be true in order for this idea to make any sense or for it to exist, right? So this is a tool we can use all over the place in our lives to get at looking at the foundational assumptions about whatever we believe or think or see, and this can really help us free up from being entangled in what might be flawed assumptions to begin with, right? So a lot of times where we go wrong is with the initial assumption we have around something, right? And this is often where people's thinking doesn't go, right? We don't turn our thinking inward back on the roots of the idea we're looking at to go, well, is that accurate? Is that correct? Is that the best way? Et cetera, et cetera. I just did a recent Substack post about this. But basically, this idea of looking at first principles is a huge part of how, for example, Tesla, Elon Musk has innovated with Tesla and with SpaceX. It's a big part of how different, internet companies have disrupted industries like Uber, for example. You want to look at before Uber existed. This is another great example. The assumption was that if you didn't have a car and you needed to get around, you either had to take a bus or take a cab, right? The assumption was that cabs were the best way to hire a car or driver to get around, right? And then, Uber is like, well, perhaps is there a better way, right? Perhaps we could create a new model that's outcompetes cabs and is a better experience for you as a person riding in the car and, is perhaps more cost effective. And thus Uber was born. Not saying Uber's great, not, condoning, all the shenanigans of Uber, just saying as a foundational idea, that's how they disrupted the taxi industry, right? So hopefully you get my point here. So I started, like I said, about a year ago, looking at what are the foundational assumptions of psychedelics, of psychedelic therapy, of therapy itself, of hypnosis and how hypnosis works, of how, healing happens, right? What are the foundational assumptions here? And what are the assumptions I'm operating from? What are the assumptions my teachers are operating from? What are the assumptions, the culture at large operates from around these topics? And are they correct? Right. And I'll explain it. I want to give a little context as to why I was even asking that question, besides just my own fascination at trying to really get at the roots of things. So let's kind of unpack that really quick. But that's essentially what started to happen in this process is I started to look at, okay, what's the real foundation here of, a coaching, process when it goes well and someone has a transformative experience, right? When I do hypnosis properly and the person goes into a trance and something unfolds and they have a big cathartic healing experience, what's happening? When I look at my teachers who do jaw-dropping, near miraculous work, and you're like, what the heck just happened? Holy moly, that person's whole life just transformed. What's going on, right? Like what's at the root of that? And is that the same thing as, kind of what they're teaching at the more surface level in these courses? So let me give a little more of an explanation here. I want to kind of get into kind of framing how I got here. And this will all start to make sense. Okay, so around this time a year ago, like I said, there were a lot of things converging for me. One of which is that, I'm always training with and practicing with other peers and other coaches. I have group meetings where we, talk about our skills, or we bring in new techniques or new questions or themes or whatever. And, we're always kind of mutually sharpening the swords together, so to speak, as coaches, sharpening the tools of the trade, so to speak. And one of my peers brought up a really good point, which kind of resonated a lot with, what I was finding with people in the psychedelic therapy space who are trying to heal themselves, a lot of DIYers. And also I was finding a lot, even with my own clients and how they're coming in and kind of the mindset and the way they're coming in, where are they at, right? And what he was saying is that, essentially, if we want to get people from step A to step, Z, so to speak, or, we want to take someone through a process of, getting them from where they're at to where they want to be in terms of life transformation and growth and healing. A lot of times the real work, the real challenge is getting people ready to be at step A. And as he said that really resonated for me. That really hit home. And I realized, yeah, this is exactly the problem I'm seeing with a lot of people who are trying to DIY their own healing, or people who are my own clients and they're coming in and they want help around healing. They want help around psychedelic therapy. One of the major problems I see, and I still see it, but I definitely saw it back then a year ago, is that there are a lot of people who aren't ready to tolerate and stay regulated through the kind of big states and the big emotions and the big epiphanies and the weirdness and the discomfort and the strangeness and the challenge and the everything that comes with taking a psychedelic in the first place. There's a lot of people out there who want to use psychedelics to heal, but in order to be able to heal, they need to be able to tolerate the psychedelic. And what was breaking down, and what I still see breaking down for a lot of people, is that as they go to use the psychedelic, they are not strong enough in their own nervous system to be able to tolerate it well. And then they take the psychedelic and the psychedelic totally overwhelms them. Way more comes up than they're ready for, or it's just too confusing, too weird, too uncomfortable. And they end up more dysregulated and then a little more hopeless and disappointed because they'd heard all these wonderful success stories and they got their hopes all up, and essentially they're not ready. They're not at step A yet, which is I'm capable of tolerating the psychedelic experience. The other thing I started to notice amongst all my clients, like literally everyone, is how rough their self-talk and their self-criticism and their self-judgment was in particular. Every client would come in with really harsh beliefs about themselves, really harsh judgments, and be kind of dismissive about that, think that's normal, think that's okay. And debatably, it is normal, but I'm not sure that that's healthy, right? I'm not sure that that's what we want, or that helps, or that that's not a big deal, right? One of the narratives we see in modern society is that being self-critical and being hard on ourselves is acceptable and okay, so long as we are kind and good and considerate and respectful to other people. So as long as I'm respectful to others, I can be as harsh on myself as I want to be. Others can't be harsh on me, but I can be harsh on myself. And I started to realize all my clients kind of had that model of self-relationship. And this started to get me thinking about, the role of attachment, which was something I was working on a lot, and got me thinking about something that my teachers had told me, which is that what you see in psychedelic therapy sessions over and over and over, whether the person is cognizant of it or not, from an outside observer, guide, space holder point of view, what we see happening over and over and over is that attachment dynamics play out around the session, both in the prep and the drama before altering their consciousness, in the relationship to the medicine itself, in relationship to the guide, sitter, coach, therapist, in relationship to integration afterwards, right? In relationship to the dysregulation that might pop out during the session. All of this, there are indicators of implications of attachment stuff coming up over and over and over. So attachment, my teachers kind of pointing out attachment is a central piece to this whole process. And therefore we need to be really good at understanding attachment and attachment theory and, how relational dynamics work, how attachment works, how secure attachment works. So I kind of had this piece coming in. I was thinking about getting people to step A. I was kind of thinking about, what, all the self-criticism that people have. I was thinking about all these different modalities that I've been learning, these courses I've been taking about, good conversational hypnosis, which is relational, right? Good trauma therapy, watching sessions of that and seeing how that's done. That's also very relational. And realizing this through line of relationship as a theme through all of this, and having my teachers also explicitly say that, relationship is a through line in all of this work. Even when we're talking these big mystical non-dual states, there's still framing of relation, on around that, on either side of that. I do think in a properly non-dual experience, you kind of get beyond the relational thing for a moment, but in terms of healing, right? There's still a huge relational piece here, right? And so all of these pieces started to kind of come together for me. And it started to really click for me. And so I want to explain to you what started to click, what I started to understand, and how this all fits together. So hopefully this is making sense. Hopefully this is a bit engaging and interesting to you. If it is, do me a favor, maybe leave a thumbs up or a comment, mid-video here. But if not, no big deal. Let's talk about, what I started to understand. So what started to unfold for me is an understanding that, first of all, in order to get people to step A, to be regulated enough to even tolerate a strong psychedelic experience, especially for someone who's coming from a background of anxiety or a lot of unprocessed negative emotion, depression, fear, stress, insecurity, this kind of a thing, which is a lot of the people who are coming to psychedelic therapy, honestly, understandably, right? In order to get someone to step A, we've got to get someone self-regulation skills. We've got to get someone enough regulation skills to be able to tolerate the medicine, right? And this got me kind of really looking at, well, what do therapists do to regulate their clients, right? What do coaches do to help people through a tough moment emotionally, right? What does a hypnotherapist do to, create that sense of safety with people to be able to go into altered states and have that really work and feel fun and flowing and comfortable, right? And it started to dawn on me that, again, first principles thinking, what is the center point? What is the common approach that creates this sense of regulation in all these different modalities I'm studying, right? And how, and looking at that and looking at attachment theory, and it all started to click for me, right? And so what I started to realize was, first of all, we need to relate in a particular way and teach people how to relate to themselves in a particular way to keep their nervous system regulated enough to feel comfortable enough to be able to tolerate a psychedelic, right? This is a major missing piece, is getting people that in place first, right? And this is where a lot of psychedelic therapy and a lot of these mushroom guides and, sitter trainings and all of this, where they're really going astray, is that they're bringing people in, they're doing an intake essentially, and then they're giving you a really high dose, and maybe you've never taken anything like this in your life, or maybe you have, but you've never done it in this explicit way or at as high of a dose or whatever. And a lot of these people are just essentially taking mushrooms with no self-regulation skills, and maybe the coach, maybe the sitter doesn't even know how to properly regulate you, and they're just going to kind of hold space with you while you kind of go through whatever you go through, and that can end up really not being very effective or really working well, right? And so I started to realize that to get people to square A, step A, to get them to A to Z, so to speak, we need to get enough of a regulation going on, right? And I started to think about it, and I'm like, well, what's the fundamental thing that's happening in therapy, right? Well, it doesn't matter which type of therapy either, whether it's talk therapy or CBT therapy or a somatic therapy, or you name it, right? What's happening in a good coaching session, right? What's happening with a good psychedelic guide? What's happening in hypnosis, right? And what just became really clear, it all started to click, was fundamentally there's relating happening, right? And there needs to be good relating, safe relating, trustworthy relating, comfortable relating, a good quality connection between the therapist or the hypnotherapist or the coach or the whatever, the facilitator, and the client. There needs to be really good, safe relating happening there in order to have a successful experience. So as far as I know, there have been studies done. I need to dig deeper into this, but as far as I've heard, there have been studies done that show that the number one predictor of success in therapy isn't the modality, isn't the type of issue that's being dealt with, is literally the quality of connectedness between the therapist and the client. Right? So let that sink in. The number one thing that predicts success in therapy is how safe and comfortable and good you feel with your therapist, right? That's the biggest chunk. That is the biggest piece that creates an effective success, right? But A, there are a lot of therapists out there who aren't a fit for people, or B, don't really heed this themselves and have a weird approach themselves, haven't done their own healing work, which is a long way of saying there aren't that many good therapists out there that really know how to hold the right, safe relational space, right? And then, beyond that, there's a larger number of people than are therapists, right? So we have a real problem here in that if the number one thing that predicts successful therapy is quality of connection, but we have a lot of people who either are bad therapists, or even among all the therapists we have, we just don't have enough to meet the needs for all the people. We've got a real problem, right? We have a lot of people who need more connection, right? And so it dawned on me that we have to look at the relational piece as being primary. That understanding good relating that creates the effect of safety for our nervous system is primary to how we feel regulated, right? To how we get regulated. And that kind of brought me to this place of understanding that this is what people need to get to step A, to do psychedelic therapy properly, is they need to be able to relate to themselves and build some trust with their own nervous system. Right? And they probably need to relate to the person they're going to work with, whether it's a sitter or a guide or whoever, and build some trust there, right? And all of that's going to increase the odds of success, essentially. So just looking at my notes here. So yeah, this is fundamentally what coaching, therapy, why all this works when it works well. It's not the only reason. There are a lot of techniques, there are a lot of skills, there is a lot of know-how and a lot of complexity there. But fundamentally, the piece that needs to be right, that if it's not right, is going to really throw things off the rails, is there needs to be safe, good relating going on. So fundamentally, therapy is about relating. Coaching is about relating. Hypnosis is about relating, right? And this is kind of the thing that I think a lot, especially in the psychedelic space, where there's this emphasis on the medicine itself is doing the work, or even in the therapy space, this is the thing that I think is often not really clearly understood to be as important as it is. So that's kind of tipped me off in a whole other direction of emphasizing, clearly understanding and working with good relating, right? And we'll be unpacking what that means, because that's a bit of a clunky, vague term, but understanding good relating and its role in regulating the nervous system and creating the conditions of safety that make it possible then to change, grow, heal. So, a couple other comments about this, and then we'll kind of wrap the video, but hopefully this is interesting. Hopefully this is, this is interesting. Yeah. Okay. So like I just said, I wanted to unpack some of the implications here for you, but hopefully this resonates. What do you think about this? This idea, again, I followed first principles to get here, right? Yeah. If I want to be, honest with you guys, for a long time, I'd heard about attachment theory and about safe relating and these kind of touchy-feely aspects of somatic therapy and this approach to healing. And I kind of dismissed it because I didn't really understand what these teachers were trying to say or what they were communicating. Maybe I wasn't ready. Maybe it wasn't communicated in a way I could absorb it, but I was pretty dismissive of it. I didn't really recognize the centrality of this for a long time. But as I've gone through this process of understanding, okay, well, and it's built in. This is the funny thing. If you take a good trauma therapy course or a good NLP course or a good hypnosis course, all these things that I've taken, there's an overlap of what these teachers say about how to interact with your client in a way that works, right? In a way that creates the right dynamic and creates a good flow and a good effect. And, in the hypnosis world, they might call this building rapport with the client or with the client's unconscious mind, depending on the school of hypnosis. In therapy, they might talk about being mindful of transference and countertransference and, how to hold like a certain kind of space that creates a safe space for the client. There are different ways it's framed, but the idea, there's this central thing here, which is a very safe way of approaching relating around these difficult topics that makes it more comfortable to be able to do this work, right? And so that's the thing to get right? From a first principles point of view, we've got to get that piece right first. And I'll be unpacking this further. This ties into, early childhood development and attachment theory, and this is tribal wiring. This gets all into like what it means to be a human being, honestly. But this is the thing to get right first. If we don't get the relating piece right first, and from my point of view, that means relating with ourselves, so internal relating, and also external co-relating between people. So whoever the facilitator is you're working with, relating with them properly, right? Relating with the medicine properly. If we don't get the relational piece right first, it's going to be really hard to feel safe enough to change or grow or transform or heal, right? So that's been a huge thing to start to wrap my head around. And that was kind of this aha. And this, kind of all came to me like in the span of maybe 30 seconds, right? So this will happen to me on occasion. So I've heard, NLP and hypnosis people discuss it as like a coin drop or as like this sudden, aha, light bulb moment, that kind of a thing. Essentially, sometimes we will kind of be working on stuff at an unconscious level in our unconscious minds, problem solving. And I'm sure you've all had this experience where you're kind of not thinking about it, and suddenly like it just pops into your head and you're like, oh, whoa, I get it. Whoa, this all makes so much sense now, right? I have the answer. I know what I need to do, or I know what this is. Suddenly we have that like epiphany moment. And that's exactly what happened to me. And this whole understanding kind of like clicked into place in the span of about 30 seconds. And it was just jaw dropping. I was like, this is years of me trying to figure this out and sort this out. This is a long process. Boom, all this landed in my lap. And I'm like, okay, right. So let's explore what happens when we get the relating right first, both in the application of psychedelic work and just in my coaching work in general. And, in my own self-relationship and in helping other people improve their self-relationship by getting the relating right first. And again, what I've seen over and over has been just jaw-dropping, incredible results, rapid results, big turnarounds, and healing, feeling easier to do, feeling more doable, feeling, there's a confusing thing as we get the feel for what, this way of relating is. But as we start to that starts to really land and click for us and we really get it, healing becomes easier, becomes smoother, actually becomes really beautiful and poetic and less terrifying and overwhelming. It's doing exactly what I wanted it to do. And, to be clear, this is me, from my point of view, I feel like I'm listening to what all these pieces have been telling and really trying to really deeply comprehend it. So this is not, I don't feel like I'm innovating here, but there is kind of a sense of innovation in that we're kind of combining different understandings from different modalities into a particular view of things. And we're really putting the focus on the relating piece first and getting that really right first. And I really think that matters a lot. I'll be explaining this more in videos. This is going to be an ongoing topic on the channel for a long time. So don't worry if this doesn't all make sense or you have a ton of questions. Leave them in the comment down below. I'd love to know what your questions are. Let me see. So before we go, I want to make a couple more comments about this. So as I started to explore this, I started to realize that this piece of safe relating between people obviously is a big missing piece in our culture and in our world right now. We can look to all kinds of obvious examples of cyberbullying and trolling and social commentary and schadenfreude and judgment and all that kind of stuff, right? Like there's tons of obvious examples of where this is missing in our world. We can, also look at the quality of dynamics in family systems in the modern era and the modern day, and how safe do people feel in their own homes, and how safe did we feel growing up, and how did our parents relate to us, how did our teachers and our peers relate to us, did that feel safe? And what I started to realize is this points at at a client recently who said, once you see it, you can't unsee it. This points at a major epidemic of dysfunction in our culture, right? It really does. Which, my recent video on connection is, that's why connection, but this also points at, perhaps more poignantly for me as I started to unpack this, some real big blind spots, not just in our society around the importance and the role of safe relating in terms of healing, right? So to frame it one way, the way we relate to each other can absolutely heal or damage each other's nervous systems. And that's a big responsibility, right? And something a lot of people don't want to take responsibility for, because there's entitlement around wanting to treat others however we want to be and defend ourselves however we need to. And, there's a lot around that, but it's a blind spot in our society. And I started to realize that this was even a blind spot in the way certain teachers of mine treated me. Even the psychedelic therapy community, this is a blind spot. This is certainly a blind spot in the relationship to psychedelics and psychedelic medicines. This is a blind spot in the way that the scientific rationalist world interacts with the rest of the world. This is a blind spot in the way a lot of therapists think about their clients or think about therapy. And there are a lot of therapists who don't acknowledge that they're perhaps not operating in a comfortable, healing, secure way with their clients, are actually kind of being a bit whatever it is. I'll be unpacking all of this in future, so don't worry. But started to realize that this blind spot not only just means generally when we go out there in the world, there are a lot of people who are kind of jerks and not cool and don't care and aren't mindful about their impact on us, and how that all kind of adds up to a sense of social wounding and dysregulation. But also we have a lot of us, even in healing spaces, examples of being treated improperly or not being related to in a way that's regulating, whether this is from therapists, whether this is from life coaches to hypnotherapists to whether this is again from psychedelic therapists, whether this is from peers who are well-intended but don't know how to relate to us properly. There are a lot of examples, even in those we would let be closer to us, that can still end up wounding us, because there's not real mindfulness to the primacy of secure relating being the first thing to get right? The first step, the nature of the trust and the nature of the comfort, right? And so we'll be talking about that more, but I just want to kind of, share that. And I want to just kind of say, I know I said this a couple times in the video, when this gets applied, right? When I see people starting to apply safe connection and safe relating in their own self relationships, and as I've applied it with my clients, what I see is a rapid progression of healing, right? And what I think is going on is that when our nervous system senses the presence of safety in the connection, right? When it really clocks that and gets that, the nervous system then feels comfortable to open up and let things move and, release whatever needs releasing, or see more clearly whatever needs seeing, or there's the ability for things to get re-imprinted and changed. It's like things open up, right? But without that presence of a felt sense of safety, then there's no comfort, no trust, right? And things stay stuck. And think about that in terms of your own self-relationship. Think about that in terms of self-criticism, right? So as long as we are self-criticizing and self-judging, right, and we're hard on ourselves, then we're creating a condition where everything has to tighten and clench and defend, and therefore nothing can move or change, right? But if we can stop the process of judging and blaming and shaming and being critical with ourselves, and get curious, get connective, get respectful, we'll be unpacking what this process looks like and what these qualities are. But if we can get into that kind of space of a much more safe, secure, attuned space with whatever is going on inside of ourselves, then that creates these conditions of, safety that allows the nervous system to begin to unfold wherever it's kind of knotted up and wound up and holding all this stress and tension. So that's kind of the idea here. And the more I've experimented with this, and I'll be talking about it at length. It's an area of passion of mine. It's an area of fascination of mine. The more I've been playing with this, the more I have just absolutely seen over and over and over my own nervous system open up and heal and regulate rapidly, seen other people's nervous systems open up and regulate and heal rapidly. This is, just like my teacher said, at the center of the work, but not just on the medicine, but in day-to-day life. There are a lot of implications from this, but I want to just kind of share that off the bat. So this is where First Principles has landed me. A whole other place than I expected when I was going to the training, whole other emphasis than I expected, when looking at things from a psychedelic therapy lens or from a hypnosis lens, where often in hypnosis, we're thinking more about how can we create change for the person? Where's the person need change, and what needs changing, and the content of what needs changing, and how to approach that, and what are the contexts and the frames. And we get all about the change. And even in a situation like that, we really don't see so clearly the importance of the relating being right first, both in between the hypnotherapist and the client, but also inside the client with themselves. But it's funny because there's quotes all over the place that point to this relational thing being primary. So that's where this ended me up. And that's my epiphany. And there's a lot more to share about this. There's a whole whole set of knowledge that has really come out of this, but I want to just kind of share this story with you guys and kind of begin this conversation. I'll be contextualizing this more and clarifying more, so don't worry if it's not totally clear yet. But I just thought I would kind of share, what I've been learning, because the implications are deep and super exciting, and I'm excited to share it with you. Excuse me. So, what do you think? Does this resonate for you? Does this hit home? Do you find this boring? Do you find this a turnoff? Do you find this curious or exciting or interesting? I'd love your comments and your thoughts down below. And I'll be talking more about this. So if this doesn't resonate for you, then that, heads up that this may be a whole side of this channel to avoid, or, maybe you want to avoid my work altogether moving forward. But for the rest of you, for whoever resonates with this, join me. I'm really excited to share this. It's going to be really good. Okay. Much love to you. I hope you're having an awesome week, and I hope you have a great weekend. I'll talk to you guys soon. Take care.